they're not used to this,
Yeah.
this endless sort of gnawing away. But actually, Andrew has created this problem. So, in a way, the king, even if he doesn't make a public statement, should behind closed door and says, "This is what I expect you to do." Whether he has to make a statement, and Andrew has to come forward and saying, "I've got to deal with this." But the last time he tried to do that, he got himself into a tangled web.
The Times reports that police have held informal discussions with the government about emails and documents relating to Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor and Jeffrey Epstein. It's understood that officers from Thames Valley Police are assessing whether there are grounds for an investigation into the former prince, after emails suggested that he leaked confidential information to Epstein. Let's speak to Royal correspondent Rupert Bell. Morning, Rupert.
Good morning, Calum.
So, emailing confidential information, what are the latest details?
Well, it seems to be around some incidents with the Icelandic financial crisis. And it seems like, if you read through the email train, that the Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor wanted one of his people to find out some information. And as soon as he got that information about the financial situation in Iceland, it appears it was then forwarded to Jonathan Rowlands, who works closely with Andrew. This is what this latest train. And so I suppose what we're saying is, has Andrew at any stage, and the police may be looking into this, been passing on information that may have been that he'd got in a privileged capacity? Remember, he was representing Britain as a trade envoy, so his job was to promote Britain. And what was he, and maybe this is what the police are looking, getting financial gain from that position outside the sort of normal things that you would expect. So once again, the email trail that is coming out suggests quite clearly that Andrew's relationship with Epstein went way beyond that Newsnight interview. And so it must be exasperating, I would have thought, for members of the royal family as they keep being blindsided with further allegations from this latest release of emails relating to Jeffrey Epstein.
Do you think, Rupert, in reality, Andrew will be questioned by police? It's just a matter of when?
I think it's getting to that situation where perhaps something has to be done, and it mustn't look like an establishment cover-up or a royal family cover-up, because that won't be a good look for the royal family, who are on the back foot with this whole Jeffrey Epstein thing. It is creating a problem. Even talking about where did the $12 million come from? The king's had to deny that he's given any money there. So the whole thing is a real headache for the royal family, and it doesn't seem to be getting any better until perhaps maybe Andrew does have to answer some of the questions that seem to be regularly being asked by these emails, just to basically for the sake of the royal family, and it feels like it's getting that serious for the royal family.
Yeah. How can they respond in these sorts of situations? Because it feels to me, Rupert, like the pressure on the royal family to do something and to be more public in the face of this controversy in dealing with their response, it feels like that pressure is greater than perhaps in previous years, in previous scandals, with previous issues, where the royal household can sort of retreat into a bunker. This time, the appetite for them to actually be an active part of this, I think it feels different.
Yeah, and that's why we've seen statements this week, referencing the victims and saying they're very, we've seen the King and the Queen do that. Princess of Wales, the head of William's visit to Saudi Arabia. So they are trying to get on the front foot and saying we're thinking of the victims. But actually, what can they do? Andrew's now been sent into exile in Norfolk and kept out of public way. But it doesn't matter, because every time there seems to be more allegations coming out from the latest line of emails. And, it seems that wherever they look, there is some link, some member of the royal family suddenly appears in another scandal, whether by accident, but at the same time, their links to Epstein run far and wide.
And is that what is holding them back from being more public? Because it strikes me that they could just break with all precedent, Rupert. The King could publicly say, my brother Andrew needs to give evidence, he needs to talk to the police, he needs to go to Congress and tell them what he knows. I mean, he could do that, but is there just some level of deep concern about how far this thing goes and who may get tangled up, and so they're not quite have the confidence to do that, I suppose?
I think the confidence, they're not used to this, this endless sort of gnawing away. But actually, Andrew has created this problem. So in a way, the king, even if he doesn't make a public statement, should behind closed door and says, this is what I expect you to do, whether he has to make a statement. And Andrew has to come forward and saying, I've got to deal with this. But the last time he tried to do that, he got himself into a tangled web, which has now led to this whole situation, because it comes from that interview with Emily Maitlis, which has been torn to shreds, and he denied that he'd hardly had any relationship with Jeffrey Epstein since 2010. Well, all emails suggest that it's almost the opposite of that, and that's the problem for the royal family. Giving them money as well to Virginia Giuffre, that is not a good look. So for the king, it's not a good look, and that is the problem for the monarchy. How do they find a way of getting on the front foot with this Epstein scandal?
Rupert Bell, thank you very much indeed. That's royal correspondent Rupert Bell. You've got to wonder, with the king being heckled at various public events, Prince William being heckled at various public events about Andrew and his connections to Epstein, the kind of international reputation question has to be a part of this. What is this doing to the institution of the monarchy?
The royal brand.
Exactly. Are tourists kind of, switching off from it and saying, hang on a second, this is not what we thought it was? And actually, I do think that the option surely is open for the king to get on the front foot. I mean, he's the king. He can do what he wants. Surely it might be precedent setting, but you could go for it if he really wanted to.
But do what?
Call publicly for Andrew to be questioned by police, questioned by Congress, to talk and give information.
That's not what the royal family do, though, is
I know.
it? And
I
know,
that's the thing.
But they, I mean, what we've heard in recent weeks has actually been quite incredible from the royal family. The public statements that have been made, that is a huge step away from what we've heard from the royal family in the past.
Yeah.
If you be unthinkable, some of the things the king has said in recent weeks compared to when the Queen was with us. So, challenging times.